Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into something absolutely fascinating today, the wild intersection of ancient theology and modern physics. We're going to explore a question that literally bridges the gap between centuries-old scriptures and the cutting-edge weirdness of quantum mechanics. Are Jinn actually connected to parallel universes? Let's get right into it.
So do me a favor, just look around you right now. Take a quick glance at the empty space to your left, or maybe your right. We're totally conditioned to trust our senses, aren't we? To believe that if we can't see, hear, or touch something, it just isn't there. But what if we're wrong? What if the exact physical space you are occupying right this very second is actually being shared with a whole other dimension?
Okay, let's dive into this. Act 1, the unseen realm, or al-ghaib.
To really grasp this concept, we have to look at the foundational worldview presented in these ancient Islamic texts. You see, in Islamic theology and mysticism, reality is fundamentally dualistic. There's the physical world we know, and then there's al-ghaib, which literally translates to the unseen. Now, this isn't just a metaphorical spiritual plane floating far off in the clouds somewhere. No, the sources actually describe al-ghaib as a parallel ecology, one that shares the exact same space as our physical world. It's populated by entities and structures that are considered objectively real, just completely hidden from our standard human senses. Which brings us to Act 2, who are the Jinn?
Right, so if this parallel ecology exists, literally right on top of ours, who or what actually lives there? To understand the beings known as the Jinn, we really need to compare their creation baseline to ours. Humans, as you know, are described as being created from clay or earth, heavy, dense, very physical material. But the Jinn, they're said to be created from smokeless fire, sometimes referred to in the ancient texts as marij. It's a much lighter, subtle energy. And because of this massive elemental difference, the rule of this shared space is that the Jinn can see us, but we absolutely cannot see them. We're just operating on entirely different baselines of physical existence.
And look, if you're thinking of Jinn as just, mythical genies and lamps granting wishes, the source material paints a radically different picture. It's honestly astonishing. They're described as a fully formed parallel civilization. They possess free will and intellect just like us. They eat, they sleep, they get married, they have families, they form their own nations, and surprisingly enough, they even practice various religions. You've got Muslims, Christians, atheists. They engage in trade, get into arguments, fight devastating wars. And they do all of this, the whole shebang, while living for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, entirely unseen by us.
Moving on to Act 3, Parallel Ecologies and Dimensions.
Now, what's really interesting about this is it brings up a massive logistical question. How can an entire civilization, with nations and wars, exist in the exact same physical space as us without us ever, bumping into them? Well, the sources suggest a brilliant modern analogy to help us wrap our heads around this. Think about radio waves or TV signals. Right now, in the exact room you're sitting in, there are dozens of different radio frequencies, Wi-Fi signals, and cellular waves passing straight through the air. They're passing right through your body, but you can't see them, you can't hear them, or feel them without a receiver tuned to that exact right frequency.
Just like those unseen waves, the Jinn exist on a totally different energetic frequency of reality. It's two realities superimposed, meaning they occupy the exact same space without intersecting. But because they vibrate or exist at different baselines, again, that clay versus smokeless fire, they simply don't physically interact. It's like two different channels broadcasting simultaneously on the same TV.
Act 4, Quantum Physics and Portals.
Okay, this is where ancient scriptural narratives start sounding less like mythology and exactly like modern theoretical astrophysics. It is wild how perfectly this terminology maps over, and this brilliantly illustrates that point. What the texts called al-ghaib, well, theoretical physicists today might just call that a parallel universe or superimposed multiverse. Those ascensions to the heavens, that mirrors the concept of wormholes perfectly. Smokeless fire is a pretty spot-on description for plasma or subtle energy. And as for moving massive objects instantly across the globe, modern physics calls that quantum tunneling or quantum entanglement. Actually, let me give you a highly specific example from the texts.
The sources detail this really famous event regarding Prophet Suleiman or Solomon and the Queen of Saba, Bilqis. So her massive throne is miles and miles away. Suleiman asks his court, "Who can bring it to me?" An Ifrit, which, by the way, is a particularly powerful, incredibly fast class of jinn, steps up and says he can bring it before Suleiman even stands up from his seat. And bam! Instantly, the massive physical throne materializes. Modern commentators look at this text and point out that moving a heavy, physical object across vast distances instantaneously by bending the rules of space and matter, that sounds exactly like the scientific theory of quantum tunneling. And then there's this number from the sources that absolutely blew my mind. 50,000 years. The texts describe these ascensions, basically portals or doorways, where angels and spirits ascend to the heavens in a single day. But the text explicitly notes that this distance, if you were traveling outside of these portals, would normally take 50,000 years to cross. I mean, modern scientists studying the cosmos tell us that the only theoretical way to bypass millions of light years of space is by bending space-time itself through a wormhole. The ancient texts are describing the exact mechanics of a space-time shortcut. It's wild.
Which brings us to Act 5, the dimensional barrier.
So the crucial point is, if these dimensions overlap and portals actually exist, why isn't there just constant non-stop chaos between our worlds? Well, it's because this superimposed multiverse is highly regulated by strict barrier rules. The sources state that a firm, impenetrable separation is maintained between these dimensions. Historically, the texts say certain jinn would try to cross this barrier, traveling upward into the cosmos to eavesdrop on the angels, trying to steal knowledge of the unseen or the future. However, they are aggressively repelled by fireballs and shooting stars, what we would immediately recognize as meteors or comets. It acts as a literal cosmic security system to prevent unauthorized dimensional crossings.
Let's move to this next thought and see how all of this builds into a really profound philosophical reflection. The scholar Charles Legay-Eaton summarized this dual reality beautifully. He noted that in this worldview, there are no hermetically sealed compartments to reality. Instead, he wrote, no more than a thin membrane separates us from the joy and from the fire. The physical and the unseen are intricately, inextricably woven together. What happens on one level echoes directly in another.
Which brings us right back to where we started. We've looked at how ancient texts map out a massive, invisible civilization operating on a different energetic frequency of smokeless fire. A civilization governed by cosmic laws that perfectly mirror quantum physics and wormholes. So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. If the membrane between realities is truly that thin, what is actually happening in the empty space right beside you? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it gave you a completely new lens through which to view the universe.